Lebanon, how this is in fact going to be even a greater cause of worry for those civilians, for those residents who had no option but to flee the conflict region.
Well, definitely, like you even said, that this is a situation that is happening, where at least, there have been a lot of displacement also that have been happening, where a lot of people are also getting displaced. And even now, as, even Lebanon's Transport Minister Ali Hami also said that an Israeli airstrike that happened on Friday morning near the Masna border that crossed with Syria severed a road that was used by thousands and hundreds of people fleeing from Israeli bombardment in recent days. Now the strike, which hit inside the Lebanese territory close to the border, left even a 12 feet wide crater also, according to Hami, and even a military spokesperson for IDF has also accused Hezbollah, which is the Lebanese armed group, of using the crossing to smuggle military equipment into Lebanon, and says that the IDF will not allow the smuggling of these weapons and will not hesitate to act if necessary, as it has done throughout the war. And even there was a press conference that happened on Thursday also, where Hamia stressed that the crossing was under the authority of the Lebanese state, and even the Lebanese government figures also show that more than 300,000 people, most of which are Syrians also, have crossed from Lebanon into Syria over the past 10 days to escape the intensifying Israeli bombardments as well, Simran.
All right, Brian, thank you for sharing the details that you are picking up from the ground, as far as there is the increased fear of tensions in the minds of the civilian, as in fact now bombardments from Israeli strike cuts off the connection of the international road. Now moving on to other important developments. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, around 1,60,000 people have crossed the border from Lebanon to Syria since the escalation of Israeli bombings in Lebanon over the last month. About 60,000 children have fled into Syria from Lebanon in the past week, with many suffering from dehydration and exhaustion. All right, viewers, joining me to share, in fact, their insights and understanding of this entire conflict is Major General Rajan Kochar, who is a defense expert. He's joining me live on the broadcast. Thank you, sir, for joining us on the broadcast. And at this point of time, this is in fact becoming a larger issue for the civilians and for the residents who are at the cusp of fighting for their survival, because there were roads which had actually provided the access to flee into Syria, and the connection to these roads had now been cut off due to the consistent strikes by Israel. In this view, how can this be seen, as being of any sort of help for the civilians to in fact go and save themselves of life? What is even the option that they are left with?
Rather unfortunate, Simran, because when a war takes place, the biggest casualties are the civilians and the innocent people who are not part of the war or who are not fighting this war. And uh, what the Israel wants is right now is it has asked Lebanon and all these civilians to evacuate north of Awali River. It does not want these civilians to come into Syria, and therefore that bridge which is connecting Lebanon and Syria has been destroyed, as a result of which these movement of these civilians into Syria has been stopped. So what Israel wants it that north of Awali River, there are around 25 villages where Israel wants to carry out the operations. As a matter of fact, the operations have already started. And it wants to sanitize these villages because, according to their intelligence reports, Hezbollah has got his presence here, and they have built tunnels underground in the houses, below the houses in the village. So, the ultimate aim of Israel being, if you remember in 2000, there was a United Nation resolution 1701, which where the blue line was designated as the demarcation line between Lebanon and Israel. You would be aware that there is no agreed boundary line between the two countries. So from the blue line, if you go northwards, you will find approximately 29 kilometers is the Litani River. This is known as a buffer zone. And today, this entire buffer zone is a no-go for Hezbollah as well as any other elements of these groups. So, what is important here is to understand is that Israel wants to create this 29 kilometers into a buffer zone which has been violated by the Hezbollah because presence of Hezbollah is already there. And and in case this buffer zone is created, it can prevent any kind of firing of the missiles and all into Israel, especially to the population which is the habitat of those villages. Now, the larger question is, as you rightly said, what is going to happen to these lakhs of civilians who have been displaced? Who is going to look after them? And after some point of time, there are going to be health issues. You will have to feed them. You will have to take care of them. So I feel that United Nations has to come into play now, and especially the European Union also will have to sanction some kind of funds because. Lebanon, as we are aware, is a very, very poor country. Its debt is 150 times its GDP. So I don't think Lebanon can feed its own people in this manner. So these international agencies will have to come into play now and be a part of the humanitarian process, and which is mandated by the United Nations. They have to come in now, and possibly they can only come in after there is some kind of assurance from the Israelis that these areas are not going to be bombed.
All right, Major General Rajan Kochar, in fact, there he has in fact made it very clear about the need for the United Nations and the human rights commissions also coming in at this point of time. But I'll request you to kindly stay on with us on the broadcast as we break it down and discuss the ramifications in fact of these continuous and pertinent now conflict brewing in the Middle East. Now also tracking that the Israeli Defense Force